I drove an ex-wife home after she twisted her ankle, a woman I barely knew beyond our shared landing. And 20 minutes later, her father opened the door, shook my hand with both of his, and said, "So you're him, finally." I'm Mason Reed, 34, a civil engineer who measured everything in my life with the same careful precision I used on load calculations. And Ellie Hartwell was just the divorced neighbor from apartment 408, the one who took the stairs two at a time and left sticky notes on cactuses. She was supposed to be nothing more than a friendly face in a broken elevator. But the moment her ankle gave out in that parking lot, the moment I caught her elbow and felt her grip tighten like she was furious at herself for needing anyone, something I'd kept locked in a drawer for 3 years started to come loose. I thought driving an injured neighbor home would be the simple part. I thought wrong. Because her father didn't look surprised to see me. He looked like he'd been waiting. And the word he used, "finally," meant that somewhere in some conversation I was never supposed to hear, this woman, who swore she didn't need anyone, had been saying my name for a very long time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 20 minutes, to the parking lot, where I found her. It was a Wednesday in November, just past 6, and the Charleston sky had gone the color of wet slate. I was coming home from a site visit, still in my work boots, my mind half on a drainage problem that wouldn't solve itself. I almost didn't see her. She was sitting on the hood of her sage green Subaru, one shoe off, her camera bag at her feet like something she'd dropped and forgotten. And her face was doing that thing people do when they're trying to convince the whole world they're fine. Jaw tight, eyes forward, breathing slow and careful, like each breath cost her something. "Ellie?" She looked up, and for just a second, before she could lock it down, I saw it. Relief. The kind of relief a person feels when they've been alone with their pain longer than they wanted to be. Then it vanished. "I'm fine," she said. "You're sitting on your car, without a shoe, in the cold." I'm taking a moment. I crouched in front of her, the way I'd crouch to check a cracked foundation. "Can you put weight on it?" She tried. I watched her try, and I watched the sharp little breath she sucked through her teeth give her away completely. "It's nothing," she said. "I just need a minute." "How long have you been out here?" A pause. A long one. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Alone. In a parking lot. With a phone full of contacts, and not one of them dialed. Because asking for help was the one thing this woman would rather sit in the cold than do. I didn't say any of that. I just stood up. "My car or yours?" She blinked at me. "What? You live on the 4th floor. The elevator's working this week, so that's manageable, but you have to get there first. My car or yours?" "Mason, you really don't have to." "Ellie." I kept my voice flat and easy, the way you talk to someone who's about to bolt. "My car or yours?" She stared at me. Her jaw worked. I could see the fight happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to refuse losing, slowly, to the part of her that couldn't walk. "Mine," she finally said. "I have plants in the back. They can't sit in a cold car all night." Of course she did. I helped her up. She tried not to lean on me and failed. And the second she put her arm over my shoulder, I felt how hard she was shaking. Not from pain, I think, but from the sheer effort of letting someone hold her up. She smelled like rain and graphite, and something green, like cut stems. I noticed that. I didn't want to notice that. Her car was a museum of her life. A cracked dashboard, a nursery bag on the passenger seat, and in the back, I'm not making this up, 4 small potted plants, each one buckled in with an actual seat belt. I stopped. "You buckled in the plants. They're root-bound. Jostling stresses them. The plants have seat belts," I said slowly, "and you were sitting on a car hood with a sprained ankle, not calling anyone." She pointed a finger at me. Don't make it a thing." I slid into the driver's seat, which was pushed up so close to the wheel I had to fold myself in like a lawn chair. She watched me struggle, and, for the first time all evening, something almost like a smile cracked through. "You're very large in my small car," she said. "You drive a shoebox." "It's efficient." I pulled out of the lot. She propped her bad foot up on the edge of the seat and held her camera bag in her lap like a shield. Like if she just kept her arms full, no one could see how rattled she was. Thank you, she said quietly, watching the streetlights slide by. You'd have done the same for me. I'd have complained more. You're complaining now. I'm narrating, she said. It's different. And I smiled at the windshield before I could stop it. She caught it. What? Nothing. Mason. You're funny when you're hurt, that's all. She turned to look out the window, but the glass caught her reflection, and her reflection was smiling, and I pretended I didn't see it, because some things are kinder when you let a person keep them. The drive should have taken 6 minutes. I took the long way past Forsyth Park, past the live oaks dripping with Spanish moss, and I told myself it was because the main road had potholes that would jostle her ankle. That was a lie. I just wasn't ready for it to be over yet. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit, because 3 years ago I'd handed my whole heart to a woman who told me, on a Tuesday, in a kitchen, that I was the safe choice, not the right one. And I had spent every day since making sure I never felt this exact feeling again. The pull, the wanting, the dangerous, foolish hope. And here it was, uninvited, in a shoebox car, full of seat-belted plants. My dad's upstairs, Ellie said suddenly. Okay. He visits every other weekend. I forgot to tell him to come Sunday instead, so he came early. She paused, and I noticed her hands tighten on the camera bag. He's going to make a whole thing out of this. Out of the ankle? She didn't answer right away, and the silence was a half-second too long. Sure, she said. The ankle. I should have pushed. I didn't. We were already pulling into our lot, and my heart was doing something unreasonable, and I was busy telling it to behave. Getting her up 4 flights was its own small war. She insisted on hopping. I insisted she stop. We compromised, my arm around her back, hers over my shoulder, one slow step at a time. Halfway up she started laughing, this breathless, embarrassed laugh. What? I asked. You smell like cedar and a hardware store. That's a compliment in my world. It wasn't an insult in mine. I missed the next step entirely and had to catch us both against the railing, and she laughed harder, and for a moment, one bright, terrifying moment, I forgot every rule I'd made about keeping my heart in a locked drawer. Then we reached her door, number 408, and before either of us could knock, it swung open from the inside. A big man stood there, silver hair, a Clemson sweatshirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and a dish towel over one shoulder. He had the build of a man who'd spent 30 years on a sideline, making teenagers believe they were stronger than they thought. His eyes went first to his daughter's ankle, then to my arm wrapped around her back, then, finally, to my face. And here's the thing I'll never forget. He did not look surprised. He looked like a man whose long wait had just ended. He stepped forward and took my free hand, and he shook it. Not a quick shake, but with both of his, big and warm and certain, holding on a beat longer than a stranger ever would. Well, he said. His voice was deep and unhurried. So you're him. Beside me, I felt Ellie go completely still, every muscle in her body locked. Dad, she said. There was a warning buried in that single word. But Roy Hartwell only smiled wider, and he said the word that broke my brain in half. Finally. Ellie made a sound I had never heard from her before, half groan, half plea, the sound of a woman watching a secret tip over the edge of a cliff in slow motion. And I stood there in her doorway, holding her up, my mind racing through 16 months of mailroom chats and sticky notes and broken elevators, trying to understand how a man I'd met twice in a lobby already knew exactly who I was. What had she told him? When? And why did finally sound less like a surprise and more like the end of a very long wait? Roy stepped back to let us in. Come on, both of you. That ankle needs ice, and you. He pointed his dish towel right at me. You need to stay for dinner. Dad, it's already on the stove, baby. I made enough. He glanced at his daughter, then back at me, and his eyes softened into something I didn't have a name for yet. I always make enough these days, just in case. And the way Ellie closed her eyes, like a woman praying the floor would open up and swallow her whole, told me that whatever was happening here, it had started long before tonight. Long before the parking lot. long before the ankle. It had started in conversations I was never meant to hear. Roy Hartwell's apartment, well, his daughter's apartment, smelled like garlic and butter, and something baking that made my stomach betray me, with a growl loud enough to hear. He pretended not to notice. I appreciated that. The place was exactly what you'd expect of a woman who buckled plants into seatbelts. Plants everywhere. On the windowsills, on the bookshelves, hanging in macrame from the ceiling. Half-finished illustrations pinned to a corkboard. Wildflowers so detailed you could almost smell them. And on the mirror by the door, a yellow sticky note in her handwriting that said, "You are allowed to take up space." I looked at it a beat too long. Ellie caught me looking. She reached over and peeled it off the glass like it was on fire. "Couch," Roy said, pointing. "Foot up now." "I can do it myself," Ellie said. "I know you can," he said gently. "You can do everything yourself. That's the whole problem, isn't it?" The room went quiet. Ellie didn't answer, and I pretended to be very interested in a fern. I helped her to the couch and propped her foot on a stack of pillows, and Roy disappeared into the kitchen and came back with an ice pack wrapped in a towel and a glass of sweet tea he pressed into my hand without asking if I wanted it. "Drink," he said. "You look like a man who skips lunch." "I skipped lunch," I admitted. He nodded like I'd confirmed something he already knew about me, which was impossible, because he didn't know me. Except, somehow, he did. I knelt by the couch and reached for the ice pack. Then I stopped, because Ellie's hand was already there, and our fingers nearly touched, and I felt her go still again. "May I?" I asked. It was a small thing, 2 words, but the second I said it, the whole room changed temperature. Ellie looked at me, really looked, and something in her face that had been clenched all evening, finally, slowly, let go. "Yes," she said softly. "You may." I wrapped the ice around her ankle. Her skin was warm. She inhaled sharp and quick when the cold hit, but she didn't pull away. "Too tight?" "No. Too cold." "It's ice, Ellie." "I'm aware of what ice is, Mason." From the kitchen, Roy laughed. A big, warm rumble. "She's been like that since she was 6. Stepped on a nail. Walked half a mile home on it. Told me it was just a poke. Wouldn't let me carry her." "Dad!" "What?" "It's a good story. Shows character. It shows I'm stubborn. Same thing in this family." He pointed his spatula at me. "You'll learn that. You'll learn that." Like there was a future where I'd be around long enough to learn anything. Ellie shot her father a look so sharp it could have cut glass. He answered it with the most innocent face I'd ever seen on a grown man, and went back to his stove, whistling. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, still holding the ice in place, and for a moment it was just the two of us and the soft hiss of rain against the windows. "I'm sorry about him," Ellie murmured. "I like him. You don't have to like him. I'm not being polite. I like him." I paused. "He's loud about caring. I'm not used to that." Something flickered across her face. "What are you used to?" And I don't know why I told her the truth. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the way she was looking at me, like the answer actually mattered. "People who care quietly," I said. "Or not at all. Or who care right up until they decide you were never quite enough." Her hand, resting on her knee, went very still. "Mason. It's fine. Old story. I adjusted the ice that didn't need adjusting. 3 years ago, I was engaged. She decided I was, and I'm quoting, the safe choice, not the right one. She wanted thunder. I was a reliable forecast." I shrugged. "The way you do when you've practiced not letting something hurt." So I stopped trying to be anyone's weather. The kitchen had gone quiet. I realized too late that Roy could hear every word, but he didn't say anything. He just stirred his pot, slow and steady, giving us the room. Ellie was watching me, and the thing in her eyes wasn't pity, it was recognition, like I'd just described something she knew from the inside. "Carter used to make me prove things," she said quietly. "If I was sad, I had to explain why, with evidence, like a trial. If I wanted something, a trip, a night out, time for my work, I had to argue for it, defend it, justify it." She looked down at her hands. By the end, I'd stopped wanting things out loud. It was easier. That's why you sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. She looked up, startled. You didn't call anyone, I said, because somewhere along the way, you learned that needing help means you have to earn it first, so you'd rather sit in the cold. The silence after that was so complete I could hear the rain counting seconds against the glass. Ellie's eyes went bright. She blinked fast, twice, and looked away toward the window. How do you do that? She whispered. Do what? See the thing I've never said out loud. I didn't have an answer, so I did the only thing that felt true. I set the ice pack gently in her hand, so she could hold it herself, so she'd know I wasn't trying to take over. And I said, because I've been sitting in my own parking lot for 3 years. She let out a breath that was half a laugh and half something that ached. That's when Roy appeared in the doorway, dish towel over his shoulder, and the moment cracked wide open. Dinner in 5, he announced. Then, far too casually, he added, Mason, you eat pot roast? Ellie said you were a meat and potatoes type. Hope she was right. The fork in Ellie's hand froze halfway to nowhere. When did Ellie say that? I asked. Roy blinked, the picture of innocence. Oh, she's mentioned you plenty. The engineer upstairs. 412. The one who fixed the… He snapped his fingers, searching. What was it, baby? The mailbox lock? Carried up your groceries that time it stormed? Kept that little cactus alive longer than anyone gave him credit for? Dad, stop talking. She talks about you most weekends, Roy went on, as if she hadn't spoken, as if a freight train could be stopped by one mortified woman on a couch. I've been hearing Mason said this, and Mason did that, since, last spring, I started setting a third plate just in case she ever brought you down for dinner. Dad. But it was too late. The words were already out, hanging in the air like a struck bell. Since last spring. 8 months. For 8 months, this woman who would rather sit in a freezing parking lot than dial a phone, this woman who had learned to stop wanting things out loud, had been saying my name at her father's dinner table. I turned and looked at her. Ellie had gone the deepest red I'd ever seen a human being turn. She'd pulled a throw pillow over her face and was speaking into it, her voice muffled and despairing. I'm going to live in this couch now. This is my home. Goodbye, Ellie. I don't know him, she said into the pillow. I've never met this man. He broke in. Roy was laughing so hard he had to hold the doorframe. I reached over, gently, and pulled the corner of the pillow down just enough to see her eyes. They were wet and furious and terrified, and something else, something underneath all of it, something I'd been too scared to name in myself. 8 months, I said softly. Don't, she whispered. You buckled your plants into seatbelts, I said. But you couldn't say one word to me in the mailroom about this? It's different, she said, her voice small. Plants don't have the option of not loving you back. The room went silent. She heard it the same moment I did, the word she hadn't meant to use. Her eyes went huge. That's not… I didn't mean… I know, I said. But my heart was slamming against my ribs, like it wanted out of the locked drawer for good. Roy, mercifully, chose that exact moment to vanish back into the kitchen, and I heard him mutter, not quietly enough, Lord, finally, for the second time that night. Ellie dropped the pillow and covered her whole face with both hands. I'm so sorry, she said. I never thought you'd actually be here. I never thought… Ellie, I waited until she peeked at me through her fingers. I took the long way home tonight, past the park, through all the potholes I told you I was avoiding. She went still. There weren't any potholes, I said. I just wasn't ready to drop you off. For a long moment, neither of us breathed. And in that small apartment full of plants and rain and the smell of a father's cooking, 2 people who had each spent years learning not to want things out loud sat 6 inches apart and felt the whole careful distance between them start to disappear. Then Roy's voice boomed from the kitchen, breaking the spell. Are you 2 coming, or do I eat this whole roast myself? Because I will. I have before. Ellie laughed, wet and helpless and free. And I realized, sitting on that coffee table, that I was in serious trouble. The good kind. The kind I'd locked away 3 years ago and sworn I'd never feel again. Dinner was not a trap. It was worse than a trap. It was easy. Roy's pot roast fell apart at the touch of a fork. The potatoes were crisp at the edges, the carrots sweet, and there was cornbread he claimed was from a box, but absolutely was not. I sat at a small table crowded with too many plants, Ellie beside me with her foot propped on a spare chair, and her father across from us, telling stories that made her bury her face in her hands at least 4 times. And the whole time, under the table, where no one could see, Ellie's knee kept finding mine, and neither of us moved away. She drew on the walls, Roy was saying, pointing his fork at his daughter. 5 years old. Whole mural. Flowers, vines, a sun with a face. Her mother was furious. Mom framed a piece of it, Ellie said quietly. Cut it right out of the drywall before we sold the house. The table went soft for a moment. I'd learned, over dinner, that Ellie's mother had passed 6 years ago. That after she died, Ellie and her father had gotten very, very good at saying they were fine. At being useful. At not needing too much. I understood that better than I knew how to say. She's the most talented person I know, Roy said suddenly, not joking now. And she spent 4 years married to a man who called it a hobby. He looked at me, steady and direct. You won't do that. It wasn't a question. It was almost an order. But under it, I heard the thing he was really saying. Please be careful with her. She's all I've got left. And she's braver than she knows. And she's been hurt by someone who should have known better. No, sir, I said. I won't. Ellie's knee pressed harder against mine. That's when her phone lit up on the table. I wasn't trying to look, but I saw the name before she could turn it over. Carter. Everything in her changed. Not fear, exactly. Something heavier. The weight of an old fight she'd thought she'd put down for good, wringing its way back into the room. Her thumb hovered over decline. The phone buzzed again and again. Roy set down his fork. Baby? I know, she said. You don't have to. I know, Dad. She looked at the phone. Then she looked at me, and I watched her make a decision I had no right to be part of. A decision that was entirely hers, and that I would have respected no matter which way it went. She answered it. Carter. Her voice was steady. She stood, balancing on one foot, and stepped into the hallway, and I caught only pieces. No. A pause. No, I'm not doing that again. The part where I explain myself to you. Another pause. Longer. Then, quiet and final, like a door closing soft instead of slammed. I hope you're well. Please don't call me anymore. When she came back, her face was pale, but her eyes were clear in a way I hadn't seen all night. I didn't ask what he'd said. I didn't ask if she was okay. I just pulled out her chair. She sat. She let out a long breath. And then, in front of her father, in front of God and the pot roast and 4 seat-belted plants, she reached over and put her hand on top of mine. You didn't ask, she said. Ask what? What he wanted. Whether I was going to go back. People always ask. Her voice caught. Carter trained everyone around me to ask. It's not my business, I said. It's your call. I trust you to make it. She stared at me, like I'd said something in a language she'd been homesick for. Roy stood up abruptly, sniffed loud, grabbed the cornbread pan, and announced to no one, I'm going to be emotionally unavailable in the kitchen for approximately 5 minutes, and disappeared. Then it was just us. That easy? Ellie whispered. You just believe me? That easy. Her eyes filled. She didn't fight it this time. One tear slipped down, and she laughed at herself, wiping it away with the back of her wrist. Carter made me feel like a decision, she said, like a reasonable thing he'd settled on. Not a person he wanted, just the sensible option. She looked at me. I swore I'd never let anyone make me feel like that again. And there it was, the exact shape of her wound, laid right next to mine, because I knew the other side of that coin. I'd been the sensible option, the safe forecast, the man someone settled for, and then resented for not being thunder. We were the same fear, pointed in opposite directions. Ellie, I said, I need you to hear something, and I need you to believe it, the way you needed me to believe you just now. She nodded, barely. I didn't take the long way home, because you were convenient. I didn't carry you up 4 flights because it was easy. And I'm not sitting here choosing you because you're the safe, sensible thing to do. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. You are the least sensible feeling I've had in 3 years. You terrify me. You buckle plants into seatbelts and you fix me with one look, and you make me forget every careful rule I built to keep myself safe. There is nothing safe about how I feel about you. She was crying now, openly, and smiling through it. I don't want to be your weather report, I said. I want to be your storm and your calm and the whole stubborn sky. I choose you, out loud, on purpose, in front of your father and his pot roast. I choose you, Ellie Hartwell. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she leaned across the small table, took my face in both of her paint-stained hands, and kissed me, soft and sure and a little bit wet from the tears. And from the kitchen came Roy's voice, muffled and thick. I can hear that you're not eating, and I am thrilled. We laughed against each other's mouths, and when we pulled apart, her forehead resting on mine, she whispered the only word that mattered. Finally. The same word her father had said at the door. The word that had broken my brain open 3 hours earlier. Except now I understood it completely. It wasn't a surprise. It was a wait. 8 months of it for her. 3 years for me. Finally ending. That winter, I kept finding excuses to be in apartment 408. The mailroom chats moved to her couch. The sticky notes started showing up on my mirror too. You are allowed to want things. I kept that one. Carter never called again. By spring, Bernard the cactus had a companion plant she'd named after me, which I learned was the highest honor she could give. By summer, my lease was up, and somehow I never signed a new one, because somehow my boxes had migrated, one at a time, down 4 floors to 408. Roy claimed he just needed help with the gutters. He helped me carry every single box up those stairs, grinning the whole way. And a year after the night she twisted her ankle in that parking lot, I got down on one knee in the same spot, right there on the cold asphalt where I'd found her sitting alone, too proud to call anyone, and I asked her to never have to sit in a parking lot alone again. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Roy cried so hard he had to sit down on the curb. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a twisted ankle, a shoebox car full of seat-belted plants, and a father at the door who already knows your name because the woman who swore she didn't need anyone had been quietly saying it for months. The bravest thing isn't never getting hurt. The bravest thing is letting someone help you up the stairs, and letting yourself want them out loud. So let me ask you this, and be honest with yourself when you answer. Is there someone in your life you've been quietly saying a name about? Someone you've never let yourself want out loud, because the last time you wanted something, it cost you too much? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that steady love is real love, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Because the next one might just be the one you needed to hear. I'll see you there.